What up, though? What up, my people? You ready? 'Cause if you ready, I'm ready. Let's go. And boom. Okay. So firstly, how's the music going? How's all that cracking?
Honestly, right now, I'm hanging on to it by a limb now. Like I almost like if you didn't tell me about what you have going on, like I was really about to hang it up.
Oh,
And the reason
wow.
yeah, and the reason I say that is because it gets hard. It's hard. Like not because it's hard, not because it's hard, but
Right.
you can't do it alone. You need finances. You need certain things. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's
Yeah.
best that you get it's best that like I have a lot of material to write, like,
Right.
but as far as like beats and coming up with projects, stuff like that, I just found out about how to go about marketing and stuff like that. Even though
Right.
the era from when we were, you know, reading and you had us doing assignments like with the Versitalent family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, so I applied all of that all the way up into a point where it was like it's not expired. I just have to figure out how to go about doing groundwork again.
Right. 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 So what's funny is as we were, as I was talking to Chase and a few people, I kept getting asked the question of like, what would it look like if we brought Versitalent back today? Because obviously, it sounds odd to say. I don't want to like toot our own horns, but we were ahead of the curve. We were doing things that were so far advanced that we needed the technology to catch up. Like literally,
Yup.
the work that we're doing, the marketing we're doing, the assignments we're doing, the training, the coaching, the development, all of that had to be done manually. We had to, go in and study each thing one by one.
I
Today, you
remember.
can press a button, look at a YouTube video, and half the stuff you need to know, there's a section for it, there's a thing for it. Marketing, there's apps that do it for you. Like there's
Yup.
teams that do all those things for you. So I was thinking if we were to do it, it would be it would be a new version of the same thing, but it would be so much easier to get done. It would be so much, not necessarily easier, but there would be so many more resources.
Right.
So, for instance, when we were talking about the podcast, the goal of the podcast is to have once a week, starting off once a week, where we get into these discussions, the same kind of Versitalent discussions we had around what are you working on, spit your most recent 16 bars, what's the beat you're working on. We got different producers that are on the team, and we do the same thing with them. It's just kind of have like an hour session where all we do is just jam out virtually. So everybody's listening to the beats, they're listening to the bars, giving feedback. And then the next week, we challenge everybody to step their game up. So, all right, somebody came up with a beat. Cool, that's nice. Try to do this, flip this around, and then next week, let's hear that new beat and just keep on doing that work. So
Right.
for you, it might be something like, yeah, where's your 16 bars? All right, cool. By next week, you need to have a new 16, so we're ready to put a song together. And if a track works, if this beat is good and your verse works, then we coordinate how do we get this recorded, even if it means flying people down to a particular studio and setting it up. Because once a song is actually done, now we can put it in the marketing machine and put it on the website and put it on the app and do all of that work. So it's coming together where it makes a lot of sense to do what we were doing, but now at a whole new level. So when you
Right.
think about that stuff or you hear that, what comes to your mind? What do you think?
I know it's impossible to do it alone. I
Right.
know what it takes for. I know the type of team it would take. Like the duo team that Versitalent had. It would take all of Versitalent. I would think.
Yeah.
There's no way unless you're already like just filthy rich and you're willing to dish out money. It's like you need a machine behind you, and that machine that you're talking about is exactly. I see it like, and it's
Right.
like, and I knew this all this time. I'm like, but in all this time, I was trying to form. Well, how many years has it been since 2008, right?
Started in
Versatile.
2008. We didn't close down to 2011 in New York.
Okay, so I knew the type of team that was needed, and in my head, that's why I always kept everybody on social media because I was saying to myself, one day, hopefully one day, I can sit down and have a conversation because the whole time I'm trying to going to these places and performing and stuff. I'm like, yo, if like paying to perform, stuff like that. So it's like if you and we wouldn't have had to do that if we would have had that same versatile
Yeah.
audience to come out this for the support. And then I'm like, yo, I see the holes in everything, but it's like, but everybody's doing their own thing right now, and it's understandable because everybody had to get to a certain plateau
Right.
before this conversation even happened. I don't even know where I'm at. Like I didn't, and that's another thing. You don't know the progress that you're making until you step outside and look. And honestly, I didn't really get anywhere. I feel like I didn't really get
Right.
anywhere. I was able to open up for a few people, but that's about it.
And that's
You
the
know,
and that's
so
the key is when you think about the amount of work it takes when we're doing apparel design or photo shoots or what all of those things we're doing is now ingrained within us. We understand how the grassroots work. We understand how to make all of that work in a 1-2 story location where we're entertaining and recording and studying and training and doing all of that in one spot. And then people had to go out and do their own thing, start their own designing labels and companies. And now you have people that have found success and their singles are top charts and they're rocking and rolling. And then you have others who are like, I know there's a way to bring us all back together, not to rehash, a project of 10 years ago. That's not the work. The goal is not to let's bring Versitalent back as it was. That's impossible, would never happen. But the people, the energy, the wave, there's still such a need for it. And at the time, there was a real need for it, but there was only a need that we could fill within a certain block radius. Like we could only go but so far. But if we can set it up virtually, where it's remote, then it's unlimited. Everybody's got their own little way of working in their studio and working their stuff from where they are. We don't have to get people to fly or drive out or have people driving in or taking the train from Rockaway or from Long Island. Like we can cut all of that and just say, let's get to work on the motivation, the inspiration, the challenges remotely. And then when it's time to do something big, major, special, then we start to talk about how do we get people together. But we don't really need that work. We just need to get the minds together. Because funny enough, like you're saying, there's a couple of people who are at a point where they feel like this is it. This is the last leg. Like either it's done or it's almost done. Like I don't have much left in me. And what's cool about that is it takes the egos down. It takes down the barrier you had up of like, nah, I got this. I could do it by myself. I don't need nobody. I got it. Like, okay, you stretched out time and now you're at a point where you realize you can't do it by yourself. It's not possible to just run it by yourself. And even if it is possible, why? Why don't you lower your ego and allow everybody to eat, allow everybody to give their feedback, and then every week you get into a conversation where people are like, yo, that's ill, but step this part up. And rather than feeling like, oh man, I feel disrespected, you feel like, all right, cool, I got the work to do for the next week. I'll catch you guys next Sunday, let's get it. And you do that across the board on all these different states, from California to Colorado to Nevada to Miami you do it from all these different areas. You're getting all these different perspectives. We could seriously have a machine that's ready to do things that I don't think people knew that we could do.
that's crazy. I
So
agree. So it kind of needed to happen, is what you're saying, right? Like.
yeah, it needed to happen the way it happened so that we could all see what the right energy was. We felt that energy for a few years. And now we go out into the world to see how we can cope with it. What do we do with it? And now we have an idea of what that energy was. Like you take it for granted when you're in it, even though we had many conversations where we understood this is something special, like Versitalent and what we're doing, the work we're doing, this is special. We knew that at the time, but it takes time to pass for you to really be like, wait, all the stuff we were doing, if YouTube existed at the time, if Instagram was popping at the time, if these things existed, we'd be on a whole different planet. We'd be a whole different planet. It would be crazy. So it had to happen the way it did in order for us to see what it looks like without any of these tools and resources. So now you put people together and they're like, yo, I already know a way to turn this into something. I already know an app that can make this happen. I already know a thing that can make this happen. There's so many resources. So it had to happen that way. But what I'm excited about is bringing the minds back and seeing where people are in their journey. Are they still ready to put in work? Are we still hustling and grinding? And it's going to take muscle. It's going to take time, energy, mainly social hustle. It's going to take going online and just saying, yo, check this out, go to this site, check this thing out. Like, there's a lot of stuff we're working on. And now instead of how me, you, and Rich will go hit 42nd Street or hit the streets, now it's less of that, and it's more go online and hit the social streets, like hit everybody everywhere. And it's so much easier to do that. Like, it's a zillion times easier to hit social than it is to hit the streets. Like, we was going in person to person, interviewing with a microphone. Yo, what do you think? Was this? Yep. We was going into the streets, into the train stations.
With the flyers. Everybody had
with the flyers.
Uniforms on, the shirts. That was crazy.
We was doing it that way, and now we know what that feels like. We know what that looks like. So now when it's like, all right, the work is going to social media, I could do that like that. That's nothing. So that is what I'm most excited for, is that it changes the manual labor we were doing into something that's like, go on social, throw out some posts, and let's keep it moving. And then every week, this team, this podcast group, just continues working.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
To give you a layout of how it's looking right now is we basically have 2 podcast sessions happening once a week. The first session is on social development stuff, things like current events and what the app is about. The app is about bringing self-development to people who typically don't know what self-development is. So right now, there's a lot of people who are struggling in life. They're trying to figure out their finances. They're trying to figure out how to pay the rent, but they're also trying to figure out how to better themselves, how to be a better version of themselves. And it's tough for us, especially people coming from the hood. It's tough for us to think of self-development, of like reading certain books and studying certain things. It takes a lot to do that, because that's just not our world. We rather hit the streets, go where we got to go, do what we got to do, and then get back home and let's keep it moving. But that work needs to be accessible. So the first half of our program is around teaching people how to develop themselves, how to study certain topics in order to learn a little bit more so you can be better at work, how to have a better interview when you go for a job, how to get a promotion, how to do certain things mentally so you can improve yourself mentally, but then also physically. How do you work on your health and fitness? How do you eat certain things and monitor your presentation and your body language? And then the same for soul. How do you monitor how you're interacting and connecting with others so that your ego isn't showing through and you're not acting like you're everything, or your fear isn't showing through and you're not so scared of everything? So it takes a lot of work to do that, and that's the first part of the program. So the goal is to, once a week, we have a discussion where we bring people on who are trying to do certain things for the hood, or they're trying to do certain things for business, or successful people who are running $1 million businesses or what have you. We bring them on and just ask their insights. How did you get there? What did you do? What are your steps? What are your recommendations? So that's the first half. The second half is where we get into talent development. And talent development is where we start going over music and entertainment and photos and what are you doing for your creative endeavors. And then every week we challenge each other to get better at that, which is more of what Versitalent was typically doing.